Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today we're going to talk about what Josh Simpson wants to talk about. Got a great email here from Josh Simpson. I want to read it to you, and then I want to talk about it. Now, I love this question because I love questions that not only solve the person who's asking solves their problems, but it also applies to everybody else listening in on this podcast. So, Josh, thank you. This is a great question. I don't think I've had this one before, so I appreciate it. So it's a kind of a two-part question, so here it goes. He says, Victor, I notice you tell a lot of stories. Is that an essential way of getting sales? That's the first one. If so, is it possible that you can make a video that outlines the key parts that makes a story captivating to the customer? I've searched other videos, but none of them are as passionate as you, so I would prefer to hear it from you. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Josh. Great question. All right, let me go through the questions again. I notice you tell a lot of stories. You caught me. I am busted. Josh, you are correct. I tell a lot of stories, Josh, because I think the more visual you can make something, the easier it is for the brain to understand. At the end of the day, we're very visual creatures. And if I can make a story visual, whether it's through a story, whether it's through an analogy, or whether it's through a metaphor, those are my three primary tools: stories, analogy, and metaphors. The more I can use those to kind of give the visual or let's say the product I'm trying to sell more meaning, visual meaning, the better. So is that an essential way of getting sales? Not of getting sales, it's part of the sales process. It's part of, in looser terms, you would be correct. It is an essential way of getting sales. But again, there's other things that go on to actually getting a sale, but this is a key component, that the more visual you can make something, the more the customer can see it, like mentally in the mind's eye, see how it works, the more likely they are to want to buy from you. And this is especially true in, let's say, the B2B industry. Sometimes in the B2B industry, and again, it applies to B2C, but specifically B2B, because sometimes if you're selling a technology product or a new software solution with all the bells and whistles, and you really want to communicate to, let's say, someone who isn't very technical, how this works, and give them a visualization of how it works, then the more you come up with a visual or different stories or different ways of explaining, maybe drawing it out, whatever it may be, the more you can do that, Josh, the more effective you'll be. So, for example, if I want to give an analogy of how fiber optics work, I would say imagine a glass pipe, right? Fiber optic is really a glass pipe, probably half a diameter of a hair, right? And you would say it's a glass pipe. Imagine a round, long glass pipe. That's a fiber optic. And a light signal, the actual laser, travels through that pipe. And then what you can say is, imagine you're shining a flashlight through one end of the pipe. The flashlight has to be very strong to get to the other side. So again, that's one way of using a visual to explain a piece of technology. So the more you can use visuals, Josh, the more you'll be able to bring the person or group into your presentation. Second part, if so, is it possible that you can make a video that outlines the key parts that make a story captivating to the customer? That's the line I really love. Something that outlines the key parts that make a story captivating to the customer. That tells me, Josh, that you're focused on how customers think, and man, that's one step ahead of many people who struggle with selling. Because if you can put yourself in the customer's position, you can kind of empathize with them and just you want to help them understand. So the best way of doing that is to provide some type of structure. If you listen to all my podcasts, I'm about to give you the secret sauce of all my podcasts. Ready, folks? Now, I don't usually give this secret sauce away, but I'm going to give it to you for listening in on the Sales Influence Podcast. Why? Because I love you. But in all honesty, I just want to give it to you so you can use it, okay? So here's the structure I use. And this is a very effective structure. So for example, write this down. If you're driving, just make a mental note of it. What I usually like to do is set up a situation. Right? Set up a situation. And then I move to the second piece with, well, here's some findings. Here's a study. Here's something I found that's really fascinating about this situation. And then the third part, here's how it applies to you. So that's the 3-part. Let me go through it again. I set up a situation. Have you ever had this happen to you, right? That's the situation. Well, here's what I found. Based on this study, that study, or based on what this person's doing or that person did or that company did, that's how they solved that problem. Now, how does this apply to you? So again, situation, findings, right? Studies, whatever it may be, something that provides social proof. And then how does it apply to you? So I just finished recording a podcast where I opened up telling the story about, I'm walking every morning and I need a new pair of gym shoes, right? And so I decide to go to the store. And then, so that's the situation. I go to the store and I can't find this pair of shoes. So I gave you the situation. And then here's what I found. When I got there, I realized that these salespeople really don't know how to close a sale when they have no inventory. Now, here's how it applies to you. And I talk about that a little bit, how they can actually solve that. And then I said, now here's how it applies to you. And I talk about how you can learn from this example, how you can learn from what these companies are doing. So keep that structure in mind, Josh, because when you're presenting to a customer, you first want to frame the conversation, which is the situation. So for example, if I'm trying to sell you, let's say an accounting software, I would set up the situation as follows. And I would say something like, it's the end of the month, you have to run 20 different reports. And that takes you 3 hours to do, whatever it may be. And then when you run these reports, you still have to find a way to actually merge some of the data sets together to actually produce the summary report that you always need. And the process that you go through is A, B, C, D, E, F. And that chews up a lot of time. See, that's the situation. Customer goes, yeah, you know what? That's exactly what happens here. Well, here's what we found. We found that by doing this, by doing that, trying this, flipping that, turning that on, poking that, instead of going from A, B, C, D, E, F, what we now do is we just go A to D and straight to F, right? And now I show them the finding. Here's what we found. Now, how does this apply to you, Mr. Customer? By simply adding this plugin, this module to your software, you'll be able to do that. That's how it applies to you. And then I would really double down by saying, now let's talk about how much money that's going to save you. Let's talk about how much time and effort that's going to save you. And then I would try to close the sale, right? Can you now see how just buying this simple plugin will reduce your report generating time by 40 to 60% and also save you this much money every month? Now that's kind of a micro example of how to use this, but you can use this throughout a presentation. But again, if you look at your big presentation, your 45-minute presentation, or maybe your 20-minute presentation, doesn't matter. Always think about what is the situation? How can I set up a situation that the customer will understand, feel the pain of what I'm trying to explain? And that's key. They got to feel some pain, right? Because it's always about the struggle. In my past podcast, I talked about the hero story. And the hero story starts out like this. Everything's fine. All is good in the world. Then, boom, something happens. A trigger event. Something happens to disrupt normalcy. And then a solution is applied. And then a new normalcy is established again. That's all this really is. When you talk about a situation, well, here's a situation a lot of customers deal with. And then you say, but here's what we found. Our findings, and then say, now here's how it applies to you and how you can take advantage of these findings. So Josh, I hope that helps. It's very quick, it's very simple, it doesn't have to be complex. Situation, finding, and then here's how it applies to you. The last piece is important, Josh, because you want to be empathetic and let the customer know this is why it matters to you. And if you can do that, you will close more deals. Well, that's it for this Sales Influence podcast. Again, don't forget to leave me some feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. I'm getting a lot of great feedback on YouTube, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. Also, check out my sales training website, seminarsonselling.com. I will be releasing a new course on prospecting within the next 2 weeks. It's about 17 videos long. Pretty exciting. So again, seminarsonselling.com. Check it out. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.